This is Thriving at MCC Lehigh Valley.
Greetings, and welcome to Thriving at MCCLV. You have reached another installment of the On-Call series that we're doing here at MCCLV, where we talk to MCCLVers about their call and if their call has changed at all over their lifetimes. It's just been a great series. We're here at the fourth installment, and we're here with Mark Aurand. And we're so glad that Mark is joining us here today. And Mark, share with us first and foremost, just a little bit about yourself. If you have an elevator story or an airplane story or, in 30 seconds or less, who is Mark Aurand?
Well, still trying to figure that out, I think. But, I was born in a pastor's family. So when you sort of start to think about call and religious engagement and all that kind of stuff, my early life was very formed by growing up as a PK, as we sometimes call it, a pastor's kid. And it was a legacy that was not just in my father initially, but also in my uncles and my grandfather, and then ultimately my mother became ordained as well. So it was part of my heritage from the beginning, but I did not choose that path. Went to college, studied political science, went to law school at Temple, clerked for a judge here in Lehigh County for a couple of years, and then went to work in private practice. And for 25 to 30 years, worked for a couple law firms in the Lehigh Valley, and then started my own law firm a couple years ago, 2018, so it's 3 years ago now. Focused on nonprofits and small businesses and trying to provide legal services more affordably to those organizations. So that's been my professional life, my education. I've always been engaged in church stuff, and I've always been engaged, well, not always, but for many years been engaged politically as well.
So I want to return to what you're doing currently, but first I want to just take a little bit of a step back and share with us. So you were in private practice. What were some of the specifics of that calling? So that was for a number of decades. What were some of the specifics of what you did during those years?
Yeah, well, see, I went to law school. Well, when I graduated from college, I didn't know what to do. So I worked for 3 years, and I eventually decided to go to law school. And part of the call to law school was to learn some skills that I felt I could use to help people who may have difficulty navigating the legal system. But private practice is sort of a common path for lawyers, but it's not really all that good at helping you help people, especially when you practice within a large firm. Sad to say, a lot of the focus is on making money and not as much on serving the community. So while I did that for 25 to 30 years and found it oftentimes challenging and intellectually stimulating, I did not always feel that it was going in the right direction for any kind of a deeper level of service.
But then you developed, later on in your career, you felt this call toward serving nonprofits and small businesses. So share a little bit more about what are some of the things that you provide?
Well, so for a number of years, I was frustrated with the private practice work that I was doing, and I kept trying to find a different pathway. And for whatever reason, those pathways did not open for a number of years. But ultimately, I figured out that with technology as it is, that I was able to provide these kind of services with low overhead, and therefore could make them more cost effective and affordable for nonprofits and small businesses that typically do not have much money to spend on legal services. And I felt that it was more in the direction I wanted to go, because nonprofits tend to serve the community in a broader way, and small businesses, employ folks and provide different services to the community that are valued and appreciated. So it felt to me that it was at least more in the direction of my original vision of using my learned skills to help people who may have otherwise difficult access to the legal system. And so, right now we have a low overhead firm, so I don't really have much of an office, and I don't have support staff, and I don't have big computer systems, and I don't have big record storage costs and all those kinds of things. We do most of everything on the cloud and apps and working from home or other places. And so we are able to do services at a pretty reduced rate for our clients, which are mostly nonprofits and small businesses. So I feel in that sense we're doing somewhat of a service to the community at large.
Absolutely. Mark, before I forget, did you ever feel any pressure at all from either your mother or your father or your uncle or anyone else in your family to pursue the religious life at all, to pursue pastoring? Did you get any pressure for that, or were you celebrated? Yay, Mark is going to be a lawyer.
Yeah, I don't recall a lot of pressure in my immediate family. I think there were other cousins who picked up the mantle, so I think to some degree that reduced the pressure. But yeah, it's probably better that there wasn't a lot of that pressure. But it was always part of what I did on my, not as a career, but as a volunteer calling, or whatever you want to call it. And that was the fact that I was engaging in the church and engaging in political stuff that was important to me from a social justice perspective, helped me to sort of feel better about the work that I was doing not being exactly where I wanted it to be, because I felt like I at least was contributing in these other ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do want to make it clear for our viewing audience that, of course, a religious calling is not better than any other calling. They're all equally wonderful callings. So I was just curious, though, if you got any pressure to do that. And I'm glad that you did not get pressured into that.
By the way, I think my brother would say he felt pressure. So it's not. It's sometimes families see children in different ways in terms of what they think they're called to. So I'm not sure he would respond the same way. But
okay, fair enough. I want to go back to something you said about political calling, and share with us a little bit about how that developed. It sounds like it wasn't something that was all along the journey. Did that develop at some point along the journey? Share with us just a little bit about that political calling. You're called to be politically active.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I think I got a degree in political science in college. So there was always an interest. When I graduated from college, I lived in Philly for a while, and happened to be there the year that Wilson Goode ran for mayor the first time, and Wilson Goode was the first African-American mayor in Philadelphia, and he ran against Frank Rizzo in the primary, and I was very involved in that campaign as a volunteer, which was a very interesting and intense experience, because it was really the clash between the African-American community and the white Italian community, and it was pretty intense. So that was an early experience. And then but then, you get involved in raising a family and and working hard at a job that demands a lot from you. And I really didn't do much other than follow things until 2008, when I just was so frustrated with what was happening in the political system that I felt like I couldn't sit on the sidelines. So I was among the earlier supporters of the Obama campaign and ended up going to volunteer trainings and ended up being a team leader for the Obama grassroots organizing effort in the area in which I live. And I felt that was, I don't know, for me, politics has never just been about politics. It's been about trying to achieve a greater good. And I know sometimes people get really frustrated and just feel like neither side is contributing to a greater good. But I think there are differences, at least at times, and that there are candidates and campaigns and issues that push in a better direction. And I felt like I needed to not just talk about it, but to get engaged to do it. So I did that in 2008. And then, ever since then, I've been active on a local volunteer basis. And in 2014, I ran for state senate and lost. And in 2013, and I think that this is where you and I crossed paths maybe the first time, I led the Organizing for Action effort in the Lehigh Valley, which was a advocacy group that was trying to get certain legislation passed around gun reform and immigration reform and those kinds of things. And and then since like 2016 or something, I co-led a local organizing group here in Northampton County, just trying to again help candidates who we think are going to help bring about a little more justice and a little more for the betterment of the community.
Mark, what would you tell someone who's watching this tonight? What would you tell them if they're thinking about running for office? They feel called to run for office. What are some tips and pieces of advice that you would offer to that person?
Well, it was one of the best experiences of my life, but it's hard. It's really hard.
What made it hard?
Well, it's 24/7. It's, for most of us, stretching us beyond our comfort zones almost pretty much every day, pretty much multiple times every day. There's a lot of pressure to raise money. There's a lot of, for those of us who are doing it that have ongoing jobs, it's a real challenge to balance both the job and the campaign. It's hard on your family, who are suddenly thrust into the spotlight in a way that they may not feel comfortable with. You don't get to spend a lot of time with your family while you're doing it. But the rewards are pretty unique too. It's pretty unusual to, knock on door after door after door after door, to listen to people's stories, to learn of what's going on in their lives, to feel like you may have an opportunity to help them with the issues that they're challenged by. It's one of my frustrations about the political system is that a lot of really good people refuse to get involved. And a lot of the people that do get involved are not always really good people, not to be judgmental, but it tends to attract people, not always for the right reasons. And my involvement was really around service. It wasn't that I needed a job. It wasn't that I needed the attention. It was really around service and about concerns for the community and the feeling that the community wasn't served. So I think it's really important for good people with good values and good beliefs and good sincere, genuine concerns about their communities to get involved. And it can start very small. I mean, it can start with a school board, or it can start with a township supervisor, or it can start with a school. There's lots of different ways that one can sort of get involved in the system that don't. I started running for state senate. That was my first campaign. So that's a tough place to start. But there are lots of different ways to get involved, and I really encourage people to do it, even though, the system's frustrating. And even if you get in, you're not going to be able to achieve a lot of what you want to achieve because you're just one person. But I always thought it was not only important to fight for legislation and issues in Harrisburg or wherever, whatever the legislative venue is, but it's also important to be a leader in your own community. And by having that title, somehow you get more opportunity, I think, to lead. And so for me, it was both thinking about, hopefully someday getting some legislation of importance done, but it was also about what could I do in that role in my local community. So I think good people need to get involved, because we're never going to get closer to social justice and a better world if we don't have good people serving in those roles. Did that answer your question?
Yes, no, thank you so much. I think sometimes what gets lost so often is this idea of servant leadership. So that's great advice. It's not about getting a job. It's not about attention. It's about serving. Running for political office, it's about serving. It's about having that heart for serving people. So thank you for that great reminder. So just one more question before we close our conversation here today, our on-call conversation. So we've talked about your calling, Mark, as a lawyer. We've talked about your calling politically. Can you talk a little bit about balancing that calling with your calling to be a husband and a dad, and the joys and the challenges of balancing all of that, all of those callings?
Yeah. And to get a full picture of that, you probably should talk to my wife and my kids. But I have two sons, both of whom are grown now. And, it was, the career took more from my family than I would have wanted at times. And I'm not sure I always did a good job of balancing those demands. It's when you're starting out in a career and it's a high pressure, sort of a high volume environment, it's difficult to prove yourself in that environment while still being true to your family and your other responsibilities. So I'm sure I didn't balance that well all the time.
But surely you did from time to time.
Well, I mean, I'm still in a happy marriage, and my kids are still, we get along well and all those kinds of things. So hopefully we did something right along the way.
Absolutely.
It was very important to me. I think I was engaged with my kids when I was around and that kind of stuff. I mean, I certainly did all that, but I would do some things differently to do it over again.
Wouldn't we all?
Yeah. We would.
Yes, we would. Well, thank you so much for your time here today, Mark, for participating in our on-call series at MCCLV. Just a reminder to all those who are watching, this happens on the second Thursday of every month at MCCLV. So stay tuned for next month, second Thursday of the month, and another installment of On Call. Thank you again, Mark.
Thank you. Take care.